My name is Bernardine Walker, and at 32 years old, I never imagined my own mother would betray me like this. I spent my entire adult life saving $120,000 with the dream of buying my first home. Then one morning, I woke up to find my bank account emptied and my credit card maxed out, all because I refused to pay my younger sister Amanda's $50,000 shopping debt. The worst part was discovering a handwritten note from my mom that said Amanda deserved my money more than I did. What followed was the hardest decision I have ever made. If you want to hear how I turned this devastating betrayal around, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happened when the police showed up at her door. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Boston, Massachusetts, where most families struggled to make ends meet but still tried to provide stable homes for their children. Our family began as what seemed like a normal household. My mom, dad, and me living in a small two-bedroom home with faded blue siding and creaky wooden floors. My dad worked as a mechanic at a local garage, while my mom stayed home with me. Those early years were fairly peaceful, even though money was always tight. Everything changed when I was 12. One evening, during a dinner of meatloaf and instant mashed potatoes, my dad announced he was leaving. He had met someone else, a waitress from the diner near his shop. I still remember my mother screaming and throwing plates at the kitchen wall as he packed his things. He left that night with only a duffel bag and his toolbox, promising to send money and visit regularly. Both promises turned out to be lies. Child support checks arrived sporadically for about 6 months before stopping altogether. I only saw him twice after that night. My mom changed after he left. Whatever warmth she once had, even if it appeared only occasionally through her usually stern demeanor, vanished completely. She started dating almost immediately, cycling through a series of men who rarely lasted more than a few months. She seemed terrified of being alone. When I was 14, my mom announced she was pregnant. Her boyfriend at the time, Rick, was a truck driver who seemed decent enough but was hardly ever around. By the time my sister Amanda was born, Rick had already moved on, though he did sign her birth certificate and agreed to pay child support. Unlike my father, he actually kept his word and continued sending regular payments until Amanda turned 18. From the moment Amanda was born, it was clear she would be the center of our family's world. My mom adored her in ways she never showed me. While I had been expected to take care of myself from a young age, Amanda was spoiled and shielded from every discomfort. My mom called her princess and bought her new toys and clothes even when we could barely afford groceries. I learned early that my role was to help take care of my sister and otherwise stay out of the way. By the time I was 16, I was working after school at a local grocery store, stocking shelves and bagging groceries for minimum wage. Most of my paychecks went toward my own school supplies and clothes, and I saved whatever I could for college. My mom never asked how I spent my earnings, and I never offered to help with household bills. Financial independence wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. College was a struggle. I had good grades in high school, but not good enough for major scholarships. I was accepted into the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and moved into the dorms during my freshman year, using student loans. I worked 2, sometimes 3 part-time jobs, washing dishes in the cafeteria, tutoring other students, and taking weekend shifts at a coffee shop. Every semester felt like walking a financial tightrope, but I was determined to graduate without being crushed by debt like so many of my classmates were. During college, my mom and Amanda stayed in the small house. I visited occasionally for Sunday dinners, but every conversation revolved entirely around Amanda, her grades, her friends, her activities. By then, my mom had a slightly better job as an office manager, and Amanda lacked nothing. She always had the newest phone, trendy clothes, and participated in expensive activities like dance competitions and cheerleading camps. I often wondered how my mom managed to afford it all, but never asked. After graduation, I was lucky enough to land an entry-level position at a respected financial firm in downtown Boston. The irony wasn't lost on me. I would be advising people on money management, while my own family had a dysfunctional relationship with finances. Maybe that's exactly why I was drawn to the field. I had seen firsthand how financial instability and poor decisions could destroy lives. My starting salary was modest, but I lived with 2 roommates in a cramped apartment and saved diligently. Every month, 30% of my paycheck went straight into savings, no exceptions. While my coworkers splurged on designer clothes and weekend getaways, I bought my work attire from clearance racks and spent my weekends exploring free activities around the city. Some people called me excessively frugal, but I called it security. Over the next 8 years, I worked my way up to become a full financial advisor with my own client portfolio. My savings grew steadily, first reaching $10,000, then $50,000, and eventually crossing 6 figures. I tracked every dollar using detailed spreadsheets, projecting when I could finally afford a down payment on a small condo. That number, $120,000, became my obsession, the tangible symbol of my independence. Meanwhile, Amanda graduated high school with average grades and enrolled at a state college with her tuition covered by a combination of Rick, father number two's, savings, and student loans. Mom threw her an extravagant graduation party that must have cost thousands, while my own college graduation had been celebrated with a modest dinner at a chain restaurant. Despite the blatant favoritism and emotional distance, I maintained a relationship with my family. We still gathered for major holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. I became the family safety net, the one they called when the car broke down or when an unexpected medical bill arrived. I helped when I could with small amounts, telling myself it was the right thing to do, even as resentment simmered under the surface. Last year, I received a major promotion at work. My client list had expanded, and my investment strategies had performed well even during market downturns. My boss called me diligent and insightful, qualities he said made me excellent at helping others secure their financial futures. The promotion came with a significant raise, accelerating my home buying timeline. At 31, I was finally getting close to my goal. During our monthly family dinner in January, I excitedly shared my plans to start house hunting in the summer. Mom nodded absently while serving lasagna, then quickly redirected the conversation to Amanda. Looking back, I should have recognized it as a warning sign, but I was too focused on my approaching milestone to notice the storm brewing within our small family. 3 years into her college education, Amanda shocked everyone by announcing she was dropping out to become a social media influencer. She had built a small following on Instagram and TikTok, posting fashion try-on hauls and makeup tutorials. She was convinced she was on the verge of going viral and landing major brand deals that would make her rich and famous. Mom, unsurprisingly, supported her completely. When I suggested Amanda finish her degree first, or at least have a backup plan, I was immediately dismissed. "You just don't understand how things work these days," Mom said, using the nickname I had always hated. "Social media is where the money is. Amanda has real talent." Amanda moved back home and converted the small second bedroom into what she called her content creation studio. She spent hundreds on ring lights, backdrops, and a new laptop with video editing software. When I asked how she was paying for all of it, she vaguely mentioned brand partnerships, though I never once saw her promote anything specific. What I did notice, however, was her increasingly luxurious lifestyle. Despite having no visible income, she constantly wore new clothes from expensive brands, had her nails professionally done every 2 weeks, and took frequent trips to New York City for what she called networking events, though her social media posts made them look more like shopping sprees and nightclub outings. The first time Amanda asked me for a loan was about 6 months after dropping out of college. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was between client meetings. "Bernadine, I need a tiny favor," she began, her voice slipping into the pleading tone I'd come to recognize. "I have this amazing opportunity to collaborate with an influencer who has like 50,000 followers, but I need to fly to Miami this weekend and I'm a little short on cash." "How short?" I asked, already opening my banking app. "Just $500, she said quickly. "I'll totally pay you back next month when my sponsorship money comes in." I transferred the money, already knowing deep down I would never see it again, but telling myself it was a small price to support my sister's dreams. The next request came only 3 weeks later, $1,000 for a designer handbag she claimed she absolutely needed for a brand meeting, then $2,000 for a professional camera. The amounts climbed while the time between requests shrank. Each loan came with promises of repayment that never happened. After the fourth or fifth request in as many months, I finally set a boundary. "Amanda, I can't keep lending you money," I said firmly over the phone. "I have my own financial goals, and these loans are adding up." "Wow, okay, Miss Financial Advisor," she snapped, her tone turning icy. "Sorry for thinking my own sister would support my career. I guess that's too much to ask." She hung up. An hour later, my mom called. "How could you refuse to help your sister? She's trying to build something, and you make more than enough money to help her." "Mom, I help when I can, but Amanda has borrowed nearly $5,000 in the past few months and hasn't repaid any of it. I have my own expenses and savings goals." "You've always been selfish, Bernadine. Your sister would help you if the situation were reversed." I bit back the obvious response that Amanda had never helped me with anything and ended the call as politely as I could. For the next few weeks, my calls and messages to both of them received only cold, dismissive replies. Then came what I now recognize as the beginning of the end. A Sunday family dinner in early spring. Mom had prepared a full roast with all the sides, Amanda's favorite meal. The unusual effort should have been my first clue something was wrong. We were halfway through dinner when Amanda suddenly burst into tears, mascara running down her face. "I have something to tell you both," she sobbed. Mom rushed to her side, stroking her hair and promising we would fix whatever it was. I stayed seated, a knot forming in my stomach. Amanda's confession spilled out between broken sobs. She hadn't made a single dollar as an influencer. Not one. Her lifestyle had been funded entirely by credit cards. She had opened accounts with multiple banks and department stores, maxing each one out. She now owed more than $50,000 across 12 different cards, and the minimum payments alone were over $2,000 a month. "I've been trying to make the payments with new cards," she wailed, "but they're all rejecting my applications now. The collection agencies won't stop calling. One of them said they might take legal action." Mom looked stunned for about 30 seconds before turning to me with a determined expression. "Bernadine, you need to help your sister," she said, as if it was the most obvious solution in the world. I nearly choked on my water. "I need to what?" I asked. "You have the savings. You can pay off her debt and she can repay you over time. You know how to set up a proper payment plan. This is what family does." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the audacity of her request. They wanted me to hand over nearly half of my life savings, money I had sacrificed and worked years to accumulate, to bail Amanda out of a mess she created through pure irresponsibility. Meanwhile, Amanda had stopped crying and was watching me with hopeful, expectant eyes. She had clearly been counting on this solution all along. "Have either of you considered bankruptcy?" I asked finally. At her age, she'd have time to rebuild her credit. "Bankruptcy?" Mom gasped, as if I had suggested something scandalous. "She is 22 years old. She cannot declare bankruptcy. It would ruin her future. And giving her a consequence-free bailout would help her future how?" I countered. The conversation quickly unraveled. Amanda began crying again, accusing me of wanting her to suffer. Mom grew more agitated, reminding me of all those supposed sacrifices she had made for me growing up. I tried repeatedly to suggest financial counseling, debt consolidation, or even helping Amanda get a real job to start repaying the debt herself. But they weren't interested in any solution that didn't involve my checkbook. As the voices rose, I noticed neighbors glancing toward our windows. I pushed my chair back from the table, standing with more force than intended. "I am not paying off $50,000 of credit card debt for shopping sprees and vacations," I said firmly. "I'm willing to help Amanda figure out her options and make a plan, but I will not hand over my savings." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom stared at me with an expression I had never seen before, something between disbelief and fury. Amanda slumped in her chair, no longer crying, but visibly defeated. As I grabbed my purse and prepared to leave, Mom spoke in a low, controlled voice that sent a chill through me. "You are going to regret this decision, Bernadine. Family takes care of family." I should have recognized the warning in her words, but I was too angry and hurt to care. I walked out, unaware the worst was still ahead. For 2 weeks after that disastrous dinner, my phone stayed eerily silent. No calls from Mom demanding I reconsider. No tearful voicemails from Amanda. The silence was both a relief and deeply unsettling. In my family, conflict usually meant explosive arguments followed by a grudging reconciliation, not this cold, calculated distance. I buried myself in work, taking on more clients and staying late at the office most nights. The distraction helped, but the tension lingered in the back of my mind. I found myself checking my phone more often than usual, half expecting their names to appear on the screen. In the 3rd week of silence, I received an unusual call from my bank. The representative wanted to verify whether I had recently changed my mailing address for statements and correspondence. "No, I haven't made any changes," I said. "Well, we received a request to update your address last week. Since it didn't come through our secure online portal, we wanted to confirm it directly with you." I thanked her for the diligence and asked the bank to place a security alert on my accounts. A chill ran through me as I ended the call. Someone had tried to redirect my bank statements, and given recent events, it wasn't hard to guess who. The next day, my credit card company called with a similar alert. Again, someone had attempted to change my mailing address but failed the security verification. I immediately changed all my passwords and security questions using answers my family would never know. Just as my anxiety over these security breaches reached its peak, I received a text from my mother, shockingly casual. "Bernadine, it has been too long. Come for dinner tomorrow night. I'm making your favorite pot roast." The message was so normal, so void of any reference to our last brutal conversation, that it threw me off balance. Part of me wanted to decline and protect my boundary, but another part, the one conditioned since childhood to seek my mother's approval, accepted before I could stop myself. "I'll be there. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, sweetie." The unexpected term of endearment set off alarm bells. Mom rarely called me sweetie. That nickname was always reserved for Amanda. I arrived at the house the next evening with a heavy sense of foreboding. Mom greeted me with a warm hug, another rare move that only deepened my suspicion. The house smelled amazing, filled with the comforting aroma of slow-cooked beef and herbs. "Amanda is out with friends tonight. I thought it would be nice for just the 2 of us to have dinner. Like old times." There were no old times of just the 2 of us having dinner, at least none that I remembered, but I nodded and followed her to the kitchen. The table was set with the good dishes usually reserved for Christmas. A bottle of red wine had already been opened and set to breathe. "You look tired, Bernie," Mom said as she poured me a generous glass. "Work keeping you busy?" "It's been a hectic few weeks," I admitted, accepting the wine even though I had planned to drive home. 1 glass wouldn't hurt. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Mom asked about my job and actually seemed interested in my answers. She gossiped about neighbors and coworkers, making me laugh with her spot-on impressions. She didn't mention Amanda or money once. It felt like dinner with the version of a mother I always wished I had. After dinner, she served homemade apple pie and refilled my wine glass despite my half-hearted protest. "One more won't hurt," she said. "You're so tense. You need to relax." The conversation drifted to childhood memories, mostly the rare happy ones before Dad left. Mom looked nostalgic, even tender. "You were always such a serious child, always counting your allowance and planning what to buy. So responsible. I always knew you'd be successful." The wine was making me feel warm and slightly dizzy. I had eaten a full meal, but even 1.5 glasses felt stronger than it should have. "I think I should head home," I said, my tongue feeling strangely heavy.
I have an early client meeting tomorrow. You seem too tired to drive, Mom said gently, though something in her eyes looked off. Why don't you rest on the couch for a bit? I meant to decline, to insist I was fine, but the room had started to move slightly around me. I let her guide me to the living room couch, where I sank into the cushions. Just rest a little while, I heard her say as my eyelids grew unbearably heavy. My next clear memory was waking up in the hazy gray light of dawn. I was still on my mother's couch, an afghan draped over me. My mouth was dry and a dull headache throbbed behind my eyes. I sat up slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. Had I really passed out after just a glass and a half of wine? I reached for my phone in my purse, sitting neatly on the coffee table, and checked the time. 5:15 a.m. I had been unconscious for nearly 10 hours. As my mind cleared, I noticed something was off about my purse. It was not zipped closed as I always left it, but partially open. With a growing sense of dread, I pulled it onto my lap and looked inside. My wallet was there, but it seemed thicker than usual. Opening it, I found not only my own credit cards, but several others I did not recognize, all bearing Amanda's name. They had been tucked behind my ID. Why would Amanda's cards be in my wallet? I stood up too quickly, fighting a wave of nausea and dizziness. Something was very wrong. I needed to get out of there immediately, as quietly as possible. I gathered my things and slipped out the front door without waking my mother. In my car, I examined the strange credit cards more closely.
They were all maxed out, according to the printed limits on the backs. Had Amanda or my mother been planning to somehow pin this debt on me? I drove home in a state of confused alarm, my headache intensifying with each mile. By the time I reached my apartment, one terrible possibility had formed in my mind, though I prayed I was wrong. I had not simply fallen asleep at my mother's house. The unusual drowsiness, the 10-hour blackout, my open purse with Amanda's cards planted inside, it could only mean one thing. My own mother had drugged me. I had barely stepped through my apartment door when my phone began vibrating with notification after notification. Text messages from my bank about unusual activity, alerts from my credit card company about charges exceeding my daily limit, email confirmations of large withdrawals. My hands shook so badly I could barely enter my password to access my banking app. The moment the account summary loaded, my legs gave out. I sank to the floor in my entryway, still in my coat as the horrifying numbers registered. My savings account balance? $324. Just yesterday, it had contained $120,000. My checking account showed a negative balance of $52 due to overdraft fees. Frantically, I switched to my credit card app. My card had been maxed out with cash advances totaling $6,400, right up to my credit limit. The most recent transaction had occurred at 2:14 in the morning at an ATM just 3 blocks from my mother's house. I felt physically ill, rushing to the bathroom just in time to vomit. The reality of what had happened hit me in waves of escalating horror. My mother had drugged me, stolen my debit and credit card while I was unconscious, and systematically drained every account I had. The total loss was staggering, $126,400. 8 years of disciplined saving and careful planning gone in a single night. My hands trembled as I called the bank fraud department. The representative listened sympathetically as I reported the unauthorized transactions, but his response sent another wave of nausea through me. I see here that the withdrawals were made using your physical card and correct PIN, he explained, and the transactions occurred at multiple locations over several hours. Our security system flagged the activity, but when we attempted to call you for verification, someone answered and confirmed the transactions were authorized. My phone had been in my purse next to me while I was drugged and unconscious. My mother or Amanda must have answered when the bank called. I need to report this as fraud, I insisted, fighting to keep my voice steady. I was incapacitated. Someone took my cards without permission.
The representative took down my information and promised an investigation, but I could hear the skepticism in his voice. Without evidence, it would be my word against the transaction records. My next call was to the credit card company, where I received a similar response. They agreed to freeze the account and investigate, but warned me that resolving fraud claims could take weeks or months. As the initial shock began to fade, a cold, focused anger took its place. I needed evidence. I showered quickly, changed out of the clothes I had worn to dinner, and drove back to my mother's house. It was just past 8 in the morning, and I knew from years of experience that she would not be awake yet. She had always been a late sleeper, rarely emerging from her bedroom before 10 on days she did not work. I still had a key to the house from my teenage years. I had kept it for emergencies, never imagining that the emergency would be of my mother's creation. I let myself in quietly, listening for any sound of movement. The house was silent. I moved methodically through the living room and kitchen, searching for my cards or any evidence of what had been done. In the kitchen junk drawer, I found receipts from multiple ATMs showing withdrawals in neat sequences of $2,000 each, the daily maximum. My mother had been busy, while I lay drugged on her couch, driving from ATM to ATM to extract as much cash as possible. Emboldened, I crept toward my mother's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear her soft snoring inside. I slipped past to the bathroom, where I searched through the medicine cabinet. Behind a bottle of aspirin, I found a prescription bottle with my mother's name on it. The medication was a strong sleep aid, one I recognized from my own occasional bouts of insomnia. The date on the bottle showed it had been refilled just 2 days before our dinner. In the trash can, partially hidden by tissues, I discovered an empty bottle of wine identical to the one we had drunk with dinner. My suspicions solidified into certainty. She had drugged my wine, waited for me to fall unconscious, then taken my cards and spent the night emptying my accounts. I returned to the kitchen, growing less cautious as my anger mounted. In my mother's desk, beneath a stack of unpaid bills, I found my debit card. In the adjacent drawer was my credit card, along with a handwritten note in my mother's familiar scrawl. "Amanda needed it more than you. You will understand someday." I took photos of everything with my phone, the cards, the note, the receipts, the prescription bottle. As I was photographing the last receipt, I heard a floorboard creak behind me. "What are you doing?" My mother stood in the doorway, her hair disheveled from sleep, and her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "I know what you did," I said, my voice deadly calm despite the rage boiling inside me. "You drugged me and stole my money." She did not deny it. She did not even flinch. Instead, she crossed her arms and lifted her chin defiantly. "I did what was necessary for this family," she stated. "Amanda needs that money to fix her situation. You were being selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. You think I'm selfish for not wanting to give away my life savings? Do you have any idea how hard I worked for that money? "Don't be so dramatic, Bernie," my mother sighed, as if we were discussing a borrowed sweater rather than over $100,000. "It's just money. You can save more. Amanda needs it now." "Where is it?" I demanded. "Where is my money?" "It's gone," Mom replied flatly. "I transferred it to various accounts to pay off Amanda's debts. Some of it she needed for a fresh start." "A fresh start?" I echoed incredulously. "With my money?" "We are family," she insisted, as if that explained and excused everything. "Families share resources. You've always had more than your fair share of everything." The absurdity of this statement momentarily left me speechless.
I had put myself through college. I had worked multiple jobs since I was 16. I had built my savings $1 at a time through years of sacrifice. And my mother was acting as if I had somehow been the privileged one. "Where is Amanda?" I finally asked. "She's staying with a friend," Mom replied. "She needed space from all this stress." So she knows what you did? She knows we're helping her, Mom said evasively. I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing her the photos I had taken. What you did was not helping, I said coldly. It was theft, and drugging me was assault. These are serious crimes, Mom. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. You wouldn't go to the police, she said, though there was a question in her tone. Not against your own mother. Try me, I challenged, meeting her gaze steadily. You stole my entire life savings. What did you think would happen? You will forgive me, she insisted, though she looked less certain now. Once you calm down, you will understand. It was for the best. I gathered my evidence, including my recovered cards, and headed for the door. As I reached for the handle, my mother called after me. Bernadine, don't do anything you'll regret. I turned back to her, a sad clarity washing over me. I already regret every moment I trusted you, and every dollar I ever gave this family. That stops now. I walked out the door, my mind already formulating a plan. This was no longer just about money. It was about justice, boundaries, and finally standing up for myself against the people who had taken advantage of me my entire life. In the safety of my car, parked a block away from my mother's house, I allowed myself 5 minutes to break down. I sobbed, pounding the steering wheel with open palms, releasing the shock and betrayal that threatened to overwhelm me. 5 minutes of raw emotion, timed precisely on my phone. Then I took 3 deep breaths, wiped my face, and shifted into action mode. My first stop was the police station. I hesitated in the parking lot, the weight of what I was about to do sitting heavy on my chest. Was I really going to file charges against my own mother? The memory of her unapologetic face and the empty bank accounts hardened my resolve. Yes, I was. The desk officer, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a nonsense demeanor, listened patiently as I explained the situation. I showed her the photos of the evidence and the banking notifications on my phone. I would like to file a report for theft and possibly assault, I stated, my voice steadier than I felt. Theft from a family member can be complicated, the officer acknowledged. Do you have proof that you did not authorize these withdrawals? I have proof that I was drugged without my knowledge and that my cards were taken while I was unconscious. I showed her the photos of the sleep medication and my cards found in my mother's desk. The officer's expression grew more serious. She called over a detective who specialized in financial crimes, and I repeated my story. I understand how difficult this must be, Miss Walker. Family theft cases are among the most challenging, emotionally speaking, but what your mother did constitutes several serious crimes, regardless of family connection. I provided them with all the details they needed, my mother's full name, address, Amanda's information, the exact amount stolen, and the evidence I had gathered. The detective explained that they would need to investigate before determining whether charges would be filed, but the process had officially begun. My next stop was my bank. I met with the branch manager, a man I had known for years through my financial advising work. His shock at my situation quickly turned to professional efficiency as he helped me file formal fraud reports and begin the process of trying to recover my funds. We will need to freeze any accounts the money was transferred to. Do you know where the funds went? I believe they went to pay off my sister's credit card debts across multiple accounts, and possibly some cash withdrawals. He made notes and assured me they would trace the transactions as best they could. He also issued me new cards with different numbers and helped me set up enhanced security protocols for all my accounts. By late afternoon, I was mentally exhausted, but not finished. I drove to the office of Martin Sherman, a lawyer friend who specialized in financial crimes. Martin had been a client of mine for years before we developed a friendship. He agreed to see me immediately when I called, explaining it was an emergency.
In his comfortable office with views of downtown Boston, I laid out the entire situation again. Martin listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. Bernadine, I don't know what to say except that I am truly sorry this happened to you. From a legal standpoint, you have a very strong case for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit to recover damages. Even though she's my mother? Family status does not exempt someone from the law. In fact, in some jurisdictions, theft from a family member is considered a breach of fiduciary duty, which can carry enhanced penalties. We discussed my options at length. Criminal charges would be pursued by the district attorney if the police investigation supported it. Separately, I could file a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds and possibly additional damages. Martin agreed to represent me in the civil matter and to liaise with the criminal prosecutors. What about Amanda? She may not have stolen the money directly, but she almost certainly knew about it and benefited from it. Martin nodded thoughtfully. If she knowingly received stolen funds, she could be charged as an accessory after the fact or with receipt of stolen property. At minimum, she would likely be named in the civil suit to recover any funds that went to pay her debts. After leaving Martin's office, I checked into a hotel. I could not face returning to my apartment, where every corner reminded me of my shattered financial security and betrayed trust.
I needed neutral ground to think and plan. In my hotel room, I ordered room service, not because I was hungry, but because I knew I needed to eat. As I picked at a club sandwich, I made a list of additional security measures. I called my phone company to change my number. I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus to place a freeze on my credit reports. I changed every password for every account I had, creating complex new ones that my family would never guess. I also called my boss to request a few personal days, explaining vaguely that I was dealing with a family emergency. He was understanding, having always appreciated my dedication and rarely taken time off. Around 8 that evening, my new phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I answered cautiously. "How could you?" My mother's voice came through, shaking with anger. "The police came to my house asking questions? They said you filed a report accusing me of theft?" "I did," I confirmed, my voice steady. "Because you stole from me?" "I am your mother," she nearly screamed. "You don't send the police after your mother." "You drugged me and stole my life's savings," I replied evenly. "What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to be a decent daughter and help your family." The fury in her voice was palpable. "Now you've humiliated me in front of the whole neighborhood. Mrs. Davis next door saw the police car." "Maybe you should have thought about that before committing multiple felonies," I suggested. The conversation devolved from there, with my mother alternating between raging at me and attempting to make me feel guilty. I remained calm, repeating the simple facts until she finally hung up on me. Less than an hour later, Amanda called, sobbing hysterically. "How could you do this to Mom?" she wailed. "The police came and questioned her like she was some kind of criminal." "She is a criminal, Amanda," I stated plainly. "She drugged me and stole over $100,000. "She was just trying to help me," Amanda protested. "You were being so stubborn. You have all that money just sitting in the bank while I'm drowning in debt." "It was my money, Amanda," I emphasized. "Money I worked for years to save. If you needed help, there were legal ways to ask for it." "So you're gonna send your own mother to jail?" she demanded, her voice rising. "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who was stolen from," I answered. "Where is the money, Amanda?" She went silent for a moment. "I used it to pay off my credit cards, and I got an apartment in Cambridge. The security deposit and first and last month's rent were really expensive, and I needed furniture." "So you knew. You knew Mom stole from me, and you spent the money anyway." "She said you would forgive us eventually.
It was just a loan until I get my influencer career off the ground. I ended the call feeling strangely calm. Any lingering doubt about pressing charges had vanished. They had not only stolen from me, they truly believed they were entitled to do so. They expected me to simply accept it and move on. Before going to bed, I set up small wireless security cameras in my hotel room, positioning them to capture the door and main room. I did not truly believe my mother would try to find me here, but the violation of my boundaries had left me feeling vulnerable and exposed. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed staring at the ceiling, I realized I had entered uncharted territory. For the first time in my life, I was setting a boundary with my family that could not be crossed or ignored. There would be no sweeping this under the rug, no reluctant forgiveness over a family dinner. I had initiated a legal process that would force accountability. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the provider, the safety net. I had accepted emotional distance and occasional manipulation as the price of maintaining family connections. But this theft had crossed a line from which there was no return. In standing up for myself, I was reclaiming not just my financial security, but my self-respect. I fell asleep that night with my phone close by, set to record any calls that might come in. I was done being caught off guard. From now on, every interaction with my family would be documented, every conversation preserved as potential evidence. The daughter they had taken for granted was gone. In her place stood a woman determined to see justice done, no matter the cost. For the next 3 weeks, I lived in a strange limbo of hotel rooms and legal meetings. The investigation proceeded methodically, with detectives interviewing bank employees, collecting surveillance footage from ATMs, and building a case. My lawyer, Martin, kept me updated on every development, preparing me for what would come next. Meanwhile, I found a small furnished apartment to rent month to month. I could not bear to return to my old place, where every corner reminded me of my shattered plans. The new apartment was sterile and impersonal, but it felt safe. I installed additional locks and a security system, measures that would have seemed paranoid just a month earlier, but now felt necessary. My mother tried repeatedly to contact me, alternating between angry voicemails demanding I drop the charges and tearful pleas about family loyalty. Amanda had shown up at my workplace once, causing a scene in the lobby before security escorted her out. I maintained silence, communicating only through Martin. Then came the call I had both dreaded and waited for. The district attorney had reviewed the evidence and decided to press charges. Arrest warrants had been issued for both my mother and Amanda: theft, identity fraud, and in my mother's case, assault, for the drugging me. The detective assigned to my case wanted me to know that officers would be arriving at my mother's house early the next morning to make the arrests. Do you want to be present? Some victims find it provides closure. I considered declining, imagining the process from a distance, but something in me needed to witness it, to see with my own eyes that there were consequences for what they had done to me. I would like to observe from a distance. I do not want to interact with them, but I want to be there. The detective gave me the details: a 7:30 a.m. arrival at my mother's house. They would come without sirens, make the arrests, and transport both women to the station for booking. That night, I barely slept. I questioned my decision repeatedly, wondering if I was being too harsh, if there had been another way. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of the cold calculation involved in drugging me, of the systematic withdrawals from multiple ATMs, and the complete lack of remorse. This was not a momentary lapse of judgment, it was a premeditated crime. I arrived on my mother's street at 7:15 the next morning, parking my rental car half a block away with a clear view of the house. The neighborhood was quiet, with just a few people leaving for early work shifts. At precisely 7:32, unmarked police cars and one patrol car pulled up in front of the house. 4 officers approached the door, while others remained by the vehicles.
The detective knocked firmly, the sound carrying in the morning stillness. After a long moment, the porch light came on and my mother opened the door in her bathrobe, looking confused. I could not hear the exchange, but I saw her expression shift from confusion to shock to anger. She attempted to close the door, but one officer blocked it with his foot, continuing to speak calmly. After what felt like an eternity, my mother stepped back, allowing the officers to enter. 10 minutes later, they emerged with both her and Amanda, now dressed in jeans and sweatshirts, hands cuffed behind their backs. Amanda was crying hysterically, her face blotchy and swollen. My mother walked stiffly, her head held high, scanning the street as if searching for something or someone. Her eyes locked on my car, and even from that distance, I knew she had spotted me. She stopped walking, causing the officer guiding her to pause. She stared directly at me, her expression a mixture of fury and betrayal. Then she shouted something I could not hear before being firmly led to the waiting patrol car. Several neighbors had stepped onto their porches or watched from windows. The public nature of the arrest would ensure that everyone in the neighborhood knew what had happened. There would be no hiding behind vague explanations or lies. As the patrol car drove away, I sat in my vehicle waiting for some emotional response. Guilt, satisfaction, grief. Instead, I felt strangely empty, as if watching a scene from someone else's life. I started my car and drove to the coffee shop where I had arranged to meet Martin before heading to the police station. The booking process was lengthy. Martin and I waited in an interview room at the station while the detective periodically updated us. My mother and Amanda had been photographed, fingerprinted, and were waiting for their initial appearance before a judge who would set bail. Based on the nature of the charges and their lack of prior records, Martin expected they would both be released on bail that afternoon. They will likely be assigned a public defender, but they may hire private counsel, Martin explained. Either way, this is just the beginning of the process. Criminal cases often take months to resolve, sometimes longer if they go to trial. What are the chances of that? Of a trial? Martin looked thoughtful. Given the evidence, a plea deal is more likely. The prosecutor will probably offer reduced charges in exchange for guilty plea agreements, but that depends partly on their attorneys and partly on their willingness to admit guilt. Around noon, we received word that both women had appeared before the judge. Bail had been set at $25,000 for my mother and $15,000 for Amanda. Neither had been able to post bail immediately, so they would remain in custody until the money could be arranged. "Do they have anyone who can bail them out?" the detective asked me. I shook my head. "Not that I know of. My mother has a sister in New Hampshire, but they haven't spoken in years. Amanda's friends are mostly other struggling influencers. They don't have that kind of money." By late afternoon, we learned that my mother had managed to contact her estranged sister, who had agreed to post bail for both of them. They would be released by evening with court dates set for the following month. As I was preparing to leave the station, the detective who had overseen the arrest approached me. "Miss Walker, I wanted to say that you have handled this difficult situation with remarkable composure. Many victims of family financial crimes end up dropping charges due to pressure or guilt. Your willingness to follow through has made our job possible." His words touched me more deeply than I expected. In my family, I had never received validation for standing up for myself. To have a professional acknowledge the difficulty of what I was doing felt surprisingly healing. The next day, I received a large manila envelope at my temporary apartment. It contained a copy of the formal charges filed against my mother and sister, along with a no-contact order prohibiting them from attempting to communicate with me outside of legal channels. Martin had arranged this protection without me asking, understanding instinctively that I would need a buffer against their emotional manipulation. In the weeks that followed, the legal process advanced in its methodical way. My bank had managed to freeze some of Amanda's new accounts, recovering about $30,000 of my money. Another $20,000 was found in my mother's personal account, untouched. The remaining $76,000 had been used to pay off Amanda's credit cards and for the cash purchase of furniture and the electronics for her new apartment, most of which was being recovered by the police as evidence. Meanwhile, word of what had happened spread through our extended family. My mother had apparently been calling relatives with her version of events, portraying herself as a concerned mother who had only borrowed money from her ungrateful daughter to help her younger child. Some relatives believed her, calling me to express their shock that I would send my own mother to jail over money. Others who had witnessed my mother's manipulation over the years reached out with support.
My father, whom I had not spoken to in over 15 years, somehow got my new number and called one evening. "Bernie, it's your dad," he said when I answered, his voice both familiar and strange. "I heard about what happened with your mom and the money." I waited, expecting him to try to convince me to drop the charges, as others had done. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he continued, surprising me. "I know I wasn't there for you growing up, and maybe if I had been, things would have been different. What your mom did was wrong, and you have every right to press charges." His unexpected support brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "It means a lot." We had an awkward but healing conversation, catching up on years of separation. He was remarried with 2 teenage stepchildren, living in Arizona, and working as a contractor. We agreed to stay in touch, a small silver lining in the dark cloud of recent events. 1 month after the arrests, the preliminary hearing was held. Both my mother and Amanda appeared in court with their attorneys. My mother had managed to hire a private lawyer, while Amanda was represented by a public defender. They both entered not guilty pleas despite the overwhelming evidence. As we left the courthouse, Amanda approached me in the hallway, ignoring the no-contact order. "Bernie, please," she begged, her eyes red from crying. "I didn't know she was going to drug you. I swear, I just thought she was going to ask you for the money again." "Amanda, you can't talk to me," I reminded her firmly. "It violates the court order." "I didn't steal your money," she insisted. "I just accepted Mom's help with my debts. That's not a crime." Her attorney quickly pulled her away, whispering urgently in her ear. The encounter left me shaken, but even more resolved. Even now, facing criminal charges, neither of them was willing to take full responsibility for their actions. That evening, Martin called with news. The prosecutor had offered plea deals to both women. My mother could plead guilty to theft and assault with reduced jail time if she agreed to full restitution. Amanda could plead to receiving stolen property with probation if she returned all recoverable assets and agreed to a repayment plan for the rest. "The ball is in their court now," Martin explained. "They have 1 week to accept the deals or proceed toward trial." 3 days later, Amanda's attorney contacted Martin.
She was willing to accept the plea deal, admitting her role and agreeing to return everything purchased with the stolen money. My mother, however, was still holding out, insisting she had done nothing wrong. The contrast between their responses did not surprise me. Amanda, for all her faults, was young and frightened by the reality of potential jail time. My mother had a lifetime of justifying her actions and believing herself above consequences. On the final day to accept the plea deal, my mother finally relented. Her attorney informed the prosecutor that she would accept the terms, pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a sentence of 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and full restitution of all unrecovered funds. The sentencing hearing was set for the following week. I would be allowed to make a victim impact statement if I chose to. Martin advised me to prepare one, explaining that it could be cathartic and would become part of the official record. I spent days drafting and redrafting my statement, trying to find the words to express how deeply their betrayal had affected me. In the end, I wrote from the heart about trust, family, and the long road to rebuilding what had been shattered. Not just my finances, but my sense of security and belonging. When the day arrived, I stood in the courtroom, facing my mother and sister directly for the first time since their arrests. I spoke clearly and calmly, my voice steady despite the emotion behind my words. The money that was taken from me represented years of hard work and sacrifice, I said. But what hurts more deeply is knowing that the people who should have protected and supported me instead saw me only as a resource to be exploited. No amount of restitution can repair the broken trust. However, I believe in accountability, and I hope that these consequences will lead to genuine reflection and change. As I returned to my seat, I caught my mother's eye. For the first time since this ordeal began, she looked not angry or defiant, but sad. It was a small glimpse of something I had rarely seen from her, genuine emotion without manipulation behind it. The judge sentenced them according to the plea agreements. My mother would begin serving her jail term immediately. Amanda would be on probation for 2 years, with mandatory financial counseling and community service. Both would be responsible for restitution payments until the full amount was repaid. As they were led from the courtroom, Amanda turned and mouthed, "I'm sorry." My mother kept her eyes forward, her posture rigid. The doors closed behind them, and a chapter of my life closed with it. Outside the courthouse, reporters from local news stations waited, having picked up on the unusual nature of the case. I declined to comment, letting Martin make a brief statement about the importance of treating financial crime seriously, regardless of family connections. I walked to my car alone, feeling lighter than I had in months. The legal process had not been easy, and the emotional toll had been immense. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had truly stood up for myself, refusing to be manipulated or taken advantage of. The cost had been high, losing the family I thought I had, but the clarity and self-respect I gained were priceless. 6 months passed in a blur of rebuilding. I moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city, somewhere my mother and Amanda would not easily find me once the legal restrictions eventually ended. My bank had managed to recover about half of my stolen savings by freezing accounts and liquidating the items purchased with my money. The court-ordered restitution payments would eventually restore the rest, though I knew it could take years. My mother served her 6-month sentence in full, without seeking early release. According to her probation officer, who kept me informed, she had been a model inmate, attending counseling sessions and work programs. Amanda had complied with the terms of her probation as well. She attended weekly financial management classes and maintained steady employment at a local retail store. Her influencer dreams had been set aside, at least for now. My professional life recovered faster than my personal one. When I finally told my boss what had happened, he was surprisingly understanding and even offered me an advance on my year-end bonus to help with immediate expenses. My clients remained loyal, and I threw myself into work with renewed focus. Helping others build financial stability gave me a sense of purpose during a time when my own life had been shaken. Therapy became a weekly constant, a safe place to sort through the emotional wreckage of betrayal. My therapist, Dr. Linden, specialized in family trauma and helped me identify patterns I had never seen before. How I had been cast as the provider from a young age, how my accomplishments were used, not celebrated, how my boundaries had been dismissed again and again. Family does not mean unlimited access to you or your resources, Dr. Linden reminded me during one session. Healthy families respect boundaries and celebrate each other's successes without jealousy or entitlement. Those words hit me deeply. I had grown up believing something was wrong with me, that I was ungrateful or cold for wanting independence and basic respect. Realizing the dysfunction came from the family system, not from me, changed everything. It was the beginning of healing. My 33rd birthday passed quietly, without the tense, obligatory family dinner I used to endure. Instead, I celebrated with a small group of friends at a waterfront restaurant. These were people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely at peace. One unexpected bright spot was reconnecting with my father. What began as awkward phone calls turned into regular video chats. 3 months after the sentencing, he flew to Boston to visit. We spent a weekend together. Not as strangers tied by blood, but as two people choosing to rebuild. He wasn't perfect, and our relationship had years of distance to overcome, but he showed up. He took responsibility for the past and made an effort in the present. That alone made healing possible. Watching him board his return flight, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. Rebuilding was slow and sometimes painful, but possible, with honesty, accountability, and change. The hardest day came when my mother was released from jail. Her probation officer called to inform me and assured me the no-contact order was still in effect. She had moved in with her sister in New Hampshire. Still, for weeks afterward, I found myself looking over my shoulder, uneasy, half expecting her to appear at my door. About 4 months after her release, I received an official letter forwarded through Martin. It was from my mother, handwritten on lined paper. Bernadine, it began. I have had a lot of time to think about what happened and my role in it. The counseling programs here have helped me see things I never wanted to admit. What I did was wrong. There is no excuse for drugging you, stealing your money, or betraying your trust. You worked hard for everything you have, and I had no right to take that from you. She continued. I have always been jealous of your independence and success. Instead of being proud of the remarkable woman you became, I resented you for not needing me. I favored Amanda because she depended on me, and that made me feel important. I know an apology cannot undo what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only want to acknowledge the truth and take full responsibility. I will honor the restitution payments, and I am committed to becoming better, whether or not you choose to speak to me again. I read the letter several times, searching for the manipulation I had come to expect from her. Surprisingly, there was none. No guilt trips, no denial, no blame. For the first time, she seemed to recognize me not as a resource, but as a human being with boundaries and feelings. I didn't respond right away. I brought the letter to therapy, and Dr. Linden and I discussed it carefully. This shows real insight, she said. But one letter doesn't erase years of harmful patterns. If you choose to respond or eventually rebuild a relationship, do it slowly and keep firm boundaries. I took her advice. 2 weeks later, I sent a brief, neutral response through Martin. I acknowledged her letter and appreciated her honesty, but made no promises. Amanda reached out next, also through legal channels. Her letter was less insightful, but equally remorseful. She admitted she knew about the theft as soon as it happened and used the money despite suspecting its source. She described the shame of facing coworkers and friends after her arrest, and the humbling experience of working retail after years of pretending to be an influencer on the verge of success. I always looked up to you, she wrote, though I never showed it. You always seemed so confident and put together. I was jealous and wanted what you had without doing the work you did to get there. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you. My response to her was similar, cautious acknowledgement of her apology without promises. As the 1-year mark of the theft approached, I found myself in a place I never expected. Financially, I was recovering, with about 70% of my savings restored through recovery efforts and restitution payments. I had adjusted my home buying timeline, but had not abandoned it entirely. My new goal was 2 years away, and this time I had taken additional security measures to protect my assets. Emotionally, the healing was more complex, but just as real. The betrayal had forced me to confront painful truths about my family dynamics and my own tendency to accept mistreatment as normal. Through therapy and the support of genuine friends, I was learning to value myself in ways my family never had. I had begun cautiously communicating with Amanda through email, maintaining clear boundaries while leaving the door open for a healthier relationship in the future. Our exchanges were tentative, but more honest than any conversation we grew up having. She was still finding her way, but the humbling experience seemed to have sparked genuine growth. With my mother, I remained more distant, though I agreed to receive periodic updates on her progress through her counselor. She had maintained sobriety since her release, was working part-time at a local library, and continued attending weekly therapy sessions. These were positive steps, but the breach of trust had been too deep for me to consider direct contact. Yet the most unexpected outcome of this painful chapter was the growing sense of freedom I felt. For years, I had carried the weight of being the responsible one, the family safety net, the person expected to sacrifice her own needs for others. That weight had been lifted, not in the way I would have chosen, but permanently nonetheless. I had built a chosen family of friends who celebrated my success without feeling threatened by it,
who respected my boundaries without taking offense, and who gave as much as they received in our relationships. I had reconnected with my father and was cautiously exploring what an adult relationship might look like. I was dating again, more selectively this time, with clearer expectations of mutual respect and emotional support. Most importantly, I had learned to trust myself, to trust my instincts, my judgment, and my right to protect what I had worked for. The little girl who was taught her needs came last had grown up into a woman who knew her worth and refused to apologize for claiming it. As I sat on the balcony of my new apartment one mild spring evening, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in gold and pink, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The betrayal had been devastating. The legal battle had been exhausting. The fracture in my family had been heartbreaking. Yet through it all, I had discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. Some people say money is just money, that family should always come before financial disputes. But this was never really about money. It was about respect, boundaries, and the fundamental right to decide how my own resources would be used. It was about refusing to be exploited by the very people who should have protected me. I do not know what the future holds for my relationship with my mother and sister. Change is possible, rare but possible, and trust, once broken, is never easily restored. What I do know is that I will never again allow myself to be taken advantage of in the name of family obligation. True family, whether biological or chosen, builds you up rather than tears you down. It celebrates your success rather than resenting it. It respects your boundaries rather than violating them. If there is one message I would share with anyone trapped in a dysfunctional family dynamic, it is this: you are worthy of respect. Your accomplishments belong to you. Your boundaries are valid and deserve to be honored. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for your family, is to stand firm in that truth, even when it hurts. Have you ever been forced to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from someone you loved? I would like to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone. Remember, building a life of dignity and self-respect begins with believing you deserve both. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength on your own journey of healing and self-discovery.